Mr. President, today we introduced a Congressional Review Act, a resolution of disapproval, to overturn the Biden administration's unfair student loan schemes that transfer the burden of $400 billion in federal student loans from those who willingly took on that debt and took on that debt to get a degree that would help them make more money, to American taxpayers who perhaps never went to college or who already filled their commitment to pay off their loans, oftentimes sacrificing to do so. The resolution would also end the pause on student loan payments, which by August will have cost taxpayers almost $200 billion. President Biden has extended this pause 6 times for a total of 31 months, far beyond the original justification of an ongoing pandemic. I'm joined by 38 of my colleagues in offering this resolution. Last August, President Biden announced his plan to cancel up to $20,000 in federal student loans from most borrowers and to extend the payment and interest accrual pause in student loans via executive fiat. Make no mistake, this reckless student loan scheme does not forgive debt. It does not forgive debt at all. It just transfers the burden from those who willingly took out these loans for college, and again, in order to make more money when they graduate, to Americans who never attended college or who've already paid off their loans. And I would ask, where's the forgiveness for the guy who didn't go to college but bought a truck, went to work, and is now working to pay off that loan? Is his truck loan going to be forgiven? It will not be. And what about the woman who paid off her student loans but is now struggling to afford her mortgage? Does she get a refund to help her with a mortgage? Is the administration providing them relief? And the answer is no. Instead, the administration would have them not only pay their bills, but the bills for those who decided to go to college in order to make more money and then have their student loans forgiven. This is irresponsible and unfair. And by the way, the plan does nothing to address the problems that created the debt in the first place. It doesn't hold colleges or universities accountable for rising costs. According to the College Board, in the last 30 years, tuition and fees have jumped at private nonprofit colleges by 80% and at public four-year institutions by 124%. And it doesn't ensure that students are prepared for life after college. Indeed, it creates a terrible moral hazard that tells students that federal student loans aren't real commitments and tells colleges that no matter how high they raise their prices or what product they produce, the federal government will cover the tab, courtesy of the American taxpayer. Our resolution prevents average Americans, the 87% of whom currently have no student loans, from being stuck with a policy that the administration is doing not to be fair to all, but rather to favor the few. Our resolution also protects the rule of law, which President Biden must know he is violating. During Supreme Court arguments on the legality of the student loan forgiveness in February, Justice Roberts clearly indicated that if $400 billion was to be spent on student loan cancellation, it would and should require congressional approval. That has not been given. It is a clear example of this administration attempting to subvert Congress for what appears to be purely political purposes. It is a wildly dangerous precedent if left unchecked. For Americans who cannot afford their debt or want a proactive approach to paying off their loan commitments, Congress has already authorized, again, let me just say this, for someone who can't afford their debt or who wishes to be proactive to pay off their loan commitments, Congress has already authorized 31 different programs to help pay or forgive student loans. I ask unanimous consent to insert in the record the list of federal programs already available to Americans who are struggling to repay their loans, work in public service, or who are in high-demand fields.
Without objection.
Thank you. They range from total forgiveness under public student loan forgiveness, the PSLF, Stafford loans for teachers, and Perkins loans cancellations for law enforcement officers, military, early childhood educators, and social workers, to name a few. There are also repayment programs for high-demand fields where education is specialized and the need is a public good. For example, through the Department of Health and Human Services, therapists, behavioral health providers who are needed to help our children as we face a mental health crisis are eligible for loan forgiveness. In addition, there are repayment policies related to the income of an individual. There are 5 different programs to keep payments low compared to an individual's income and to cap the total time for repayment. Quite different from this mass transfer of debt under this reckless student loan scheme, which forgets that these existing programs were set up to target limited taxpayer resources to benefit those using their degrees to serve and to fill broader public needs, or who could demonstrate that they themselves had a personal individual need. By the way, what benefit does the GI Bill hold when students can just wait to have their student loans forgiven? Why contribute to your community by teaching in a public school while getting your federal loans paid off through your service when you can just wait for President Biden to forgive your loans? Irresponsible policies like President Biden's student loan scheme weaken these incentives and discourages Americans from going into public service. President Biden and Secretary Cardona, come to the table. There are real problems in the student loan system and federal financing of higher education. Let's fix them legally through a lasting bipartisan solution. I close by encouraging all my colleagues to join me in supporting this Congressional Review Act resolution to prevent this unconstitutional student loan forgiveness scheme. It's unfair to the hundreds of millions of Americans who will bear the burden of paying off hundreds of billions of dollars of someone else's student debt. With that, I yield.